The real reason you're not getting the results you want with your training always boils down to these 5 concepts. And lucky for you, it doesn't have to do with super specific nutrients like your calcium intake, your vitamin C intake, your vitamin B12 intake. It's really just gonna be the zoomed out, simple things that make up 90+% of the muscle gain you make. If you're that type of person who stays up very late at night and you get 4 hours of sleep, whether it's because you're working, playing games, etc., but then you become the person who gets 7 to 8 quality hours of sleep, and all of a sudden there's this difference in how you look. And that's because when you're sleeping is when your body is repairing the muscle tissues you damaged during your workouts, which is effectively what makes you bigger and stronger. So the first thing you need to dial in if you really want to grow muscle in 2025 is your sleep. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to get blackout curtains. You don't need to get an eye mask. You just need the habit of getting over 7 hours of sleep and you will do great. The second concept has to do with calories. Calories are this big thing on the internet. You hear you're eating too much, you're eating too little, maintenance isn't enough. Whatever you think you're hearing, there's always someone saying the exact opposite thing. And this makes sense because different calories are great for different goals. And if you want to build muscle, eating at maintenance or slightly above maintenance calories is what's going to generally put you in the more optimal frame, especially the longer you've been lifting. And this means you also don't have to go on those crazy dirty bulks where you're eating 500 plus extra calories per day and gaining weight super fast, because this leads to a substantially higher fat mass accumulation in the same window where if you just ate at maintenance or slightly above. And the reason you can get away with maintenance is because if you're eating truly what your body is burning off, your body got enough calories to have the energy to create the muscle and repair the damage. So if your rate of weight gain is slow and steady, you are actually going to be eating the right amount of calories. And if you're a beginner, you can actually get away with a little bit of a deficit if you're starting in a more fluffy position. And the 2 concepts ahead of me is your muscle repairs micro damages. So how do we get these micro damages? This is what happens when we lift, sprint, etc. And obviously this is great because your muscles repair it, which makes them bigger and stronger. You need a great stimulus that creates a really good amount of damage that you can recover from. So to get a good stimulus, you need to be lifting heavier weights over time and for more reps, which is the concept of progressive overload, which is going to be the best muscle stimulus. And you can improve this with your exercise selection. Stuff that's more controlled and prioritizes that lengthening of the muscle will generally be a better stimulus over the long run. But there's many ways you can do it. And of course, if you're not trying to be that top 1% bodybuilder, it doesn't really matter as long as you're doing exercises you enjoy that do not put you in a position where you get injured. And what's interesting about these muscle damages is that there can be a point where there is too much, which leads us to our 4th concept of recovery. If you think about the micro damage you're making, if you make too much, there's a point where you are now overtraining and your body isn't recovering enough. So if you're not recovering enough, your gains will start to go down and your strength will likely plateau or decrease, especially if you are in a calorie deficit. So what's important to manage is your fatigue and your recovery. Your recovery comes from getting enough nutrients in, enough calories, and most importantly, just not overtraining it. Because there's many things you can do to try to compensate, but if you just don't get yourself in that position from overtraining, it doesn't matter because you're just not in that position. So make sure you're doing the right amount of training and not too much, and then you will be fine. And what this also could cause is the 5th concept is something you actually just need to avoid. It can easily happen from overtraining, and that is injury. Being injured is single-handedly the biggest thing that will reduce your gains because it takes you away from lifting. It often takes you away from daily activity, which kind of leads to more fat accumulation for the average person. And of course, there's many causes for these injuries. Lower back one I had was a stress fracture, which comes from accumulated stress over time, and eventually fissure fracture can happen in the bone. And this took me away from lifting for 5 to 6 months, which really slowed down my progress. And I also gained fat as well because I couldn't go out and do as much stuff. So over pushing yourself thinking it's helping you gain more might help you in a month, but then you have to take 5, 6, 7 months off because you've got yourself in an injured position. Obviously, there's injuries that happen for completely unrelated reasons. Your ACL could tear while you're playing soccer, and that's tough luck. You could get my other injury where you're sitting in your car at a red light and someone hits you and now you have a concussion and now you have to take time off. It just happens. But what's interesting is many of those injuries are more likely to happen if you are overtrained because your body is already behind in repair. So if you make sure you're not overtraining, you won't get those overtraining derived injuries, and other injuries will likely not take as long to heal because your body is just more ready for it and it can take on that extra load. If you're watching content on how to make your physique and health better, if you're seeing all these little things like you need this much vitamin C, you have to do this exercise. If you do this program, you're not gonna gain as much muscle as if you do this program. And if you see these things online, just understand that they might make a 1 to 5% difference. 90 to 95% is just going to be the 5 things I just said. Aggressive overload. Make sure you're eating enough and your eating makes sense. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure your recovery and fatigue is managed together, and make sure you're doing what you can to avoid injury. And that will contribute to 90-95% of your gains and how fast they come. If you want more content that puts you on a real level like this, subscribe for more.